Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of the Power to Pivot podcast. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Vicki Paris Goodman. She is an author, and we are actually going to be talking about grief today. Vicki, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Liz.
So, you have a, a sad story, but not one of staying in that. You're talking about grief. You lost your husband to cancer in 2019. So sorry for your loss. um
Thank you.
but you have turned that around. Can you walk us a little bit through your story?
Yes, that's exactly what I want to do because I think this story could help people, honestly. What happened was we moved to our retirement location in Arizona, a brand new small town, a brand new move for us to a small town for the purpose of retiring together. We built a new house, and then just a few months after moving into the new house, we received Sam's terminal cancer
Oh,
diagnosis.
I'm so sorry.
And I was pretty devastated at the time of the diagnosis. I think I was very scared, among other things. So he lived another 2 years, and he did pretty well for about a year and a half. And then I took care of him for the last few months before he passed away. And this was the love of my life. Sam was the love of my life. So I expected to be really lost for a long time. But something very strange happened. It was almost as if something outside of myself, I call it a helping hand because that's what it felt like. A helping hand began to guide me. It didn't feel like it was coming from within me. It felt like it was coming from elsewhere. And at first I felt guilty because I thought this happened on the day he died. And suddenly I was flooded with optimism. And I thought, this is really weird. What do I do with this? Do I just ignore it? But instead, I made a choice. I thought, I was so strong during the time we were going through this ordeal. And I took such good care of Sam, which is also kind of uncharacteristic of me. I'm not a caregiver type. And I really rose to the occasion. I have to say, I'm patting myself on the back when I say this. I took good care of him. And I didn't resent a moment of it. I did it very lovingly, and I really am happy about that because I wasn't sure I could do that. And I thought, you know what? If good things come my way, I am going to open myself up to them
Ooh.
and accept them. And that's exactly what characterized my life ever since. And it's been 4.5 years now.
I want to
So
stop you real quick, we'll continue on, but I'm curious. You were so open to this new feeling that you had found yourself. A, was it, how unexpected was it? And B, was there ever a point that you felt like that twinge of guilt, like, no, I should be grieving right now?
Well, I had the choice between the guilt
Okay. Yep.
and the more positive thing. And that's why I said to myself, you did well. You did everything you could for Sam. And if good things want to come your way, you should allow them to.
Oh.
And part of my experience included these insights and revelations that were also seeming to come from outside of myself. It's almost like God chose me to put this message out there by writing the book and talking to podcast audiences and others, uh, so that people could be helped by this story and see that there's another way. Some of these revelations that came to me were, I don't know, things like souls are perfected in the afterlife, and they don't they're not subject anymore to negative emotions because of all the love that's there and the fact that they're not limited by brains, things like that, that I talk about much more in actually some audio episodes that I'm going to tell your listeners about at the end, that they can get access to for free, because these concepts really will change the way people see death and loss. So anyway, so I'm being flooded with optimism. I'm getting these revelations, tidbits of wisdom. And I'm not used to that. I'm not someone who just, has these philosophical moments on a frequent basis. So all this was happening. Plus, there were opportunities coming my way that I felt motivated to grab and, embrace. And all of these things turned out really well. And I did some traveling to exotic places. My life has been inspired. And that's why I called the book To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. Because inspired grief is kind of an oxymoron on the face of it, but it's exactly what I experienced. So even though a couple of people said, I don't know if that's the right phrase to use in your subtitle, I said, you know what? I'm going to use it anyway.
You knew it was the perfect phrase to use. Because I love that you mentioned you made the choice. And it's so important. You brought a completely different energy to your grieving process. Um, and it's not saying that he passed and you were fine. Like I'm sure that, and walk me through and tell me if I'm wrong, that was sadness, but you chose to move beyond that.
I did. There was a lot of sadness, especially in the evenings. I'd come home, I'd be alone, and I'd have my time to think. And yeah, there was sadness for months. I did what I could to deal with that. Like, for example, Sam had given me a Valentine's Day card just a few months before he died, when he was still kind of in his right mind. He died of liver cancer, so ammonia levels rise toward the end and you get really foggy. But at that time, he gave me that Valentine card, and it was the very last greeting card I received from him. And I would read it every night before I went to bed. Uh, and for a whole year, I did that. And it brought back what we'd had together and kind of served to center me again every night. So that's what I did. Yeah, there was grief, but I was also having the time of my life. It it may not make sense to people, but that's why I want to get this message out there, because this is a very unique experience that I had. It's very different from any experience I've heard from other surviving spouses. And I think it could be available to everyone if they just see death for what it really is, loss for what it really is, and God in the afterlife for what they have to offer. And you also have to understand what the brain is. I talk about all these things in either the book or the audio episodes that I've done. And the
Can you
reason it's not all in the book is because some of the most um, inspired revelations came after I published the book, believe it or not. So, yeah.
that's and honestly, so it's a very similar experience for me. I was trapped in a toxic relationship that I could not get out of. And then I had an experience where I was guided out. I literally heard a voice that said, "This is where you pivot." And I didn't know what it meant. And then I found myself hiking a mountain the very next day, realizing how gripped with fear my life was. And through that, I realized I could change it in a second, and my experience changed. And it doesn't mean that it was easy. It just meant that I was in control of the experience and it didn't have to control me. And I think that you sharing this message is so powerful for people, because we can literally turn the head on our suffering. we can choose to navigate through it. And it's not, again, it's not that it's easy, and it's not that we're not sad. We're not saying ignore the emotion, because the emotion is there, the emotion is real, and it is safe to feel those feelings. I think what you and I are saying to the world is we don't have to get trapped in those emotions. We can choose to still let our lives go on and continue in the way that feels really good, that feels empowered, while also having these feelings.
You know, one of the stories, it's so true what you say, because one of the stories I tell in the book about is about how I was doing all these things, making new friends, doing things I'd never done before that I'd always wanted to do, all these things. And I'd come home and I'd feel empty inside. But I also knew I was on the right path. The reason I felt empty inside was because Sam wasn't there to either share it with me or for me to tell him about it when I got home, or, whatever. I didn't have that person who had been the most important person in my life to share things with. And I thought, you know what? I can't do anything about that. But I can continue on having all this fun and meeting all these challenges and doing all these new things. And something's going to be missing for a while. And I just need to accept that, maybe for a long while. But I knew I was on the right path, making the best of things. And the best of things was not too bad. I really was having a great time. So, yeah, there was a mix of sadness and fun. And people might be saying, huh? But honestly, that's the way it was for me. And I think it can be that way for everybody. Yeah, people do get stuck in grief. Now, I'm kind of a survivor type in the, I'll be honest, I am a survivor type. I tend to find a way out of these messes, these situations in life, these challenges. Um, some people aren't naturally that way. And that's why I think the book and the audio episodes are important, because when you have your perceptions of loss and death completely transformed to see them in a much more positive light, that that will allow people to really break free
Yep.
of the
I
grief and the stuckedness.
the stuckness we think is, we trick ourselves into believing it has to be that, forgetting how so incredibly powerful our choice is. And when we settle into that and realize, like, no, wait, this does not have to be my experience. Um, Again, like, it's just a powerful lesson. And I'm sorry that that had to be the way, but I mean, how different is your life now? How different does it feel now compared to before you had this revelation?
If anything, I am now 4.5 years later, just as happy as I was in my life with Sam. I actually have a new man now. That didn't happen for quite a while. I wasn't ready for almost 2 years. Then one morning I woke up and said, "Gee, I'd like to meet somebody." And that whole story is told in the book as well. It's kind of a funny story in a way. Um, Online dating is the most horrible experience. You can meet somebody nice, and I did, but it's a horrid
It
process. Just
sure
saying.
is. And I find it very interesting that while everybody that you talk to says that, we all still do it. So,
Well, what's the alternative?
yeah.
That's the thing. When your friends don't know anybody who, you might like to meet, that's really kind of the only way to go about it. But that's a side story we don't need to talk about.
We could do
But
a whole
anyway,
other
yeah.
podcast on that.
Yeah. Now, some of the things that I was able to do, motivated to do, there was so much serendipity involved, Liz. Things happened that were so weird. And at first I chalked it up to coincidence. But after about the sixth or seventh one, I thought, something's going on here. I didn't know if maybe Sam from the afterlife was causing things to happen for me or God, or I didn't know, and I still don't know for sure. But there were some very strange things happening, all good. Um, One thing that happened in the way of an opportunity was some friends, very good friends now, they were just acquaintances at the time, took me under their wing, invited me over every Tuesday night for their quote pizza night after Sam died. They were acquaintances that did this for me every single week. Come over for pizza night again this week, and I'd bring the salad, and I bonded with their two dogs, and I just they did such a huge service to me because I could count on that Tuesday night socializing every single week, which I really needed. People are there for you if you'll just let them help you. And like I said, these were acquaintances who are now very close friends. After what they did for me, I would do anything for them. So, yeah, so that was one thing. And they suggested I come to karaoke. They were into karaoke. And I knew I could sing, but my voice lacked power, and I didn't want to sing in front of people. So they said, no, you don't have to sing. Just come because this is a group of people you might really want to get to know. They're really terrific. And many of them are great friends now. I started going to karaoke, but the funny thing that happened was, I did try a song because nobody was paying attention to the person who was singing. I thought, well, this is really safe. Everybody was gabbing and eating and drinking and not even looking at the person who was singing. Turned out I could sing. So now I sing at public events.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and my voice just kind of grew. The more I sang, I guess it's a muscle that, it gained more power. And yeah, so that's one great thing. And then I got an email around the same time from our community playhouse announcing auditions for a staged reading. And I thought, oh, be a good way to try acting because usually in a staged reading, you have scripts on stage. So you have to learn your lines, but you don't have to memorize all of them. So I'm totally intimidated at this audition where the people sounded really polished and like they really knew what they were doing. I almost left. But then I decided, what do I have to lose? So I stayed and I got the female lead. I know it's
That's
just
a
weird what
it
happened after Sam died.
I it sounds like almost like a spiritual awakening happened for you. You're tapping in, you surrendered hard to and accepted this is what my life is now, and I am going to, like, I think you said this already, make the best of it. I'm going to do what I need to do to continue my life. And because of that surrender, you just were open, like, to so many possibilities, and you just accepted every single one.
Every single one. It's funny because I didn't say that, but you got that from what I told you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did because I accepted every single one. I got this thing from one of the travel websites that I get emails from, and they had an Antarctica expedition cruise. And I thought, oh, that sounds great. So I booked it, and some friends said, we want to go too. And, there were just so many wonderful things that I've had the chance to do since Sam died. And I know he's still with me. And I tell that story in the book too. This is one of the unbelievable things that happened after Sam died, is I started getting this sort of apparition when I get into bed at night with the lights off. I don't know what else to call it. It was just kind of this smoky grayish white thing. And sometimes, most of the time, I wasn't even sure it was there. It was so subtle. But the reason I started looking for it is because the first time it appeared, it was kind of vivid. And I thought, what is that? And I could see it with my eyes open or closed in the dark. And I thought, this is strange. Sweetie, are you there? I don't know. I didn't know what to make of it. And then a few months later, it turned to a neon yellow green. And I thought maybe I'd read about some near-death experiences. I thought maybe, he'd risen to another level over in the afterlife. I was trying to make sense of this. And then and I tell this story in the book, it's really incredible. Um, about a year after Sam died, I got really tired of wondering if the neon yellow green thing was Sam, was a manifestation of his soul, and if he was kind of visiting me almost every night. And so I said to God, I said, you know how I never pray for things for myself. I never ask you for anything for myself. I always ask you for things for other people. But I'm going to make an exception today. I really want to know if the neon yellow green thing is Sam. And I know what you can do. I have a plan. So I said, yeah, I said, okay, tonight after I get into bed, if the neon yellow green thing is Sam, please just make him as vivid as ever, even more so, or make him do something different so that I know the answer is definitely yes. If it's not Sam, just give me jet black, which will also be a little different than what I normally see. And I figured the worst thing that could happen is it looks the way it usually does, and God had chosen not to, answer my question, or Sam chose not to, whatever. And I'd be no worse off. So I get into bed that night, and I thought, oh no, what have I done? What if I get jet black? Am I ready to find out this isn't Sam all this time? And I thought,
Oh.
oh, but I thought I can't stay up forever. I have to go to bed. So I went to bed. I turned out the light. And usually this thing would take 3 to 5 minutes to kind of show up after I got in bed. I'd still be awake, but it would take a few minutes. And it would kind of gently float around or go in and out, either kind of float around or go in and out for about 45 seconds, maybe to a minute, and then just kind of fade away. Well, I turn out the lights that night, and suddenly it's there. It had never come immediately before, never. And it is vivid as this vivid neon yellow green. And instead of floating gently around, it goes back and forth frantically, maybe 4 or 5 times, and then gone. And I burst into tears and I said, thank you. I'll never question the identity of it again. Thank you. Hey, I wouldn't believe it if I was hearing this story, but that's what happened.
That's amazing. And at that point, like, what were you feeling at that moment when you realized what it was and you had that request answered?
Well, now you have to know, I was going into this scared to death. I was going to get the jet black. So I'm already kind of in this negative place of, oh my God, what have I done? And then when I saw it, and I was just so overwhelmed with joy and relief.
Yep. Do you think that the motion, how you describe it moving back and forth, do you think he was upset? Was that his way of
No,
saying, hey, it's me?
what I think happened, I know in near-death experiences I've read, and I've only read a few. I don't read these often, but apparently the soul has energy. And maybe at any given time it's kind of finite, and what I thought happened is, sometimes when the neon yellow green thing is real subtle, and almost to the point where I'm not even sure it's really there, that Sam has just chosen that night not to expend a whole lot of energy, but he's just kind of hovering around. I think what happened that night is he thought, okay, he's answering my question. He is going to make this one explosive blast of energy that's going to happen really quick because he can't sustain it for a long time. So he spent it all within just a few seconds to render this display to tell me that yes, it's me. So that's what I imagine happened.
That's amazing. I Tell us about your book, To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's guide. I'm sorry, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief.
Yeah. So a couple of years after Sam died, I thought, this story is so uplifting. What happened to me after he died. It's so unexpected and I think unique because I've never heard a story like this before. I've never read one. I'm not saying it's never happened before, but I thought I should write this. I used to be a theater reviewer on the side. I was a mechanical engineer actually, but I play violin and I've played all my life since age 7. But for over 20 years before we moved to Arizona, we were in Long Beach, California, and I wrote theater reviews because I love the theater for a local paper, just on weekends. And so I thought, I have the writing ability. I can write a book. So the way I chose to set up To Sam with Love was I thought, I want the impact of Sam's meaning to me to come through in this book. So and what a good man he was, extraordinarily good man. And so I wanted to use the first portion of the book to tell readers about Sam's life and a little of my own and our time together so that they would get to know us because I wanted his death and my loss to be very impactful to the reader. Now, again, this is a really uplifting book. So, this is a part that, people maybe are going to shed a tear. But then, and I go through, getting that diagnosis and how devastating that was for me for about a week until I got used to the idea of what was going to happen. So I did a lot of my grieving then. I'll admit that too. So then I take us through the diagnosis and treatment and certain things that happened during that time. And we did some traveling because he did well for a year and a half. And then what happened toward the end, and then his death. Really, some very serendipitous things happened even around that time when he died. On the day he died, that's a weird one too that I write about in the book. And then that latter third to a half of the book is about all the things that happened for me after Sam died, so that people can see this book as kind of an example or roadmap, almost a guide to how things can be
Mhm.
after you experience this kind of loss. So that's the way I set it up, for better or for worse. But I like it. I think it works the way it is. I've gotten some really good feedback too from many people. There's some online reviews. They're mostly on my website, vickiparisgoodman.com, and goodreads.com has some great ones. So yeah, this is why I want to get the book out there because it's had such favorable feedback so far, which is exactly what I wanted. I want this book to help people.
That's
And the
amazing.
audio episodes that I just did, because again, those insights came to me after I published the book, so they're not in the book. The two combined will really just upend our notions of death and loss in such a profound, positive way.
That's amazing. Where can
Yeah.
people find the book?
Well, people can find the book at all the usual places, but I have discounted it at inspiredgrief.com. So that's the best pricing currently available that I know of. So that's a place to get the book. And should I tell people, Liz, about my special offer that I have now? Is
Yes,
this the right time?
please. This is perfect.
Okay. Okay, because I do have a special offer. And by the way, people should consider getting 2 copies of the book, one for themselves and one for a friend. It seems like everybody I talk to has somebody they know who has lost someone, and many have lost spouses who were the loves of their lives. So, okay, the special offer. I reserved some of my most startling insights because they came to me after I published the book for a 3-part audio series that I've recently recorded and have made available as a free gift. these important concepts really will change the way people think of death and loss. And the best part is that it will remove the obstacles that keep survivors from shedding the guilt and looking forward to a happy future. So this is important. So I generally offer this series to audiences at my speaking engagements, but for a limited time, I'm offering it to podcast audiences. The 3 episodes are 12 to 15 minutes each. So just visit inspiredgrief.com, enter your email address, and you'll get free access to the 3-part audio series for a limited time, 7 days. And this is a free gift. So please get the audio episodes at inspiredgrief.com.
And we will make sure
Yeah.
that all of that's in the show notes.
Okay, good.
And when we put it out on social media, we'll make sure that everybody's aware of that as well. I'm so excited for you. I'm so grateful that you're sharing your story, because it's such an important reminder to the world that we can change the experience. We are running the show for our lives. We're in the driver's seat. If we surrender to the experience that we're meant to have here, we get to choose for it to be an amazing journey, even with the grief and the toxicity and the negativity that's out there. We don't have to stay within that experience. I'm so grateful that you're sharing your story and with us today and in the book. Guys, please make sure that you get the book and listen to the episodes, because it will help. And honestly, I'm gonna say, I feel like it doesn't matter if it's spousal grief or not. Grief is a universal emotion. At some point in our lives, we will go through it or have gone through it. So take a listen, take a read in the book, and see what's there for you.
Yeah, I think, one of the worst things many people say in terms of a loss is losing a child. It's just sort of not meant to happen that way. And I really think these audio episodes, along with the book, will help people who have lost a child too, or anyone who just meant so much to them that they just are having trouble moving forward.
Yeah. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they have questions? And tell us about Inspired Grief and the work you're doing.
Well, really, I've been on a couple of radio shows. I'm going to be on a couple more. I'm going to be um, on some more podcasts soon, because I'm just trying to get the word out there. I do have a website where there's some blog articles that have to do with this subject, and a couple that have to do with other topics. It's at vickiparisgoodman.com. So there's 2 places to find me. VickiParisGoodman.com. That's Vicki, Vicki, Paris, like the city of France, Goodman.com, or inspiredgrief.com, where you'll get the audio access to the audio episodes. And so if you just want to contact me, go to VickiParisGoodman.com. There's an email link there and a contact form.
Fabulous. Any
Yeah.
last minute things you want to make sure that our listeners know before we wrap up today?
Yes, I have actually some tips for listeners.
Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah, what I would really like to suggest, and you'll find it easier to do this after listening to the audio episodes and reading the book, but be open to guidance you may feel is coming your way. Trust it and let yourself be led. And be open to those opportunities that might be coming your way. If they came my way, I think they come to others as well. This has to be available to others. And embracing these possibilities is the starting point for a new future. It certainly was for me. You know what I call it? I call it 2 things. My plan B, and I also call it my second choice alternative to the life I had with Sam. And it can be spectacular. And there's one other thing. Strike a balance between activity and alone time. So many people told me, just keep yourself as busy as possible and you won't have time to hurt. I knew instinctively that was the wrong way to go. I knew it was well-intended advice, but I ignored it because I struck a balance between all this activity and the alone time. The alone time spent, I don't know, doing whatever, just sitting at home or reading a book or taking a hike or just walking my neighborhood so that I could process the loss. And the balance really kept me in good shape.
That's amazing. I'm curious, how did you know the difference between the guided, well, the guidance that you got in terms of what your next steps were versus you fighting it? I think, and let me back up a second. It's easy for us to sort of rationalize our way out of that surrender. It doesn't make sense. I can't do that. I'm supposed to be in pain. Like, what was that feeling? And I want to make sure that people understand that when their ego kicks in and are trying to tell them it's not safe for them to surrender, what was that feeling like?
This is why I describe it as coming from outside of me, because I'm not a particularly optimistic person. I'm not real pessimistic either. I'm kind of middle of the road. But I saw sunshine coming my way on what I thought would be the cloudiest day of my life. I described it that way in the book, and that was the day Sam died. And so the feeling was, and I think I kind of alluded to it earlier in this conversation, was I thought, well, gee, this is kind of unseemly, this optimism on the day Sam died. Am I honoring him properly by giving into it? And then something made me say, okay, it's coming my way for a reason, the optimism and the opportunities. And I took such good care of Sam. And maybe I deserve this. Maybe it's okay for me to just give in to the good things that come my way. And I wasn't sure I was making the right choice, but it all worked out so beautifully from that moment on. So I guess I consider how well it turned out to have been my confirmation that I made the right choice. Does that kind of answer the question?
That's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for you. I'm so proud of you for making that choice, because it's one that people struggle with. And I think, like I said, you're flipping the script on that so people realize it doesn't have to be that way. So Vicki, thank you again. Remind us one last time where to find the recordings and where to find you.
Find me at VickiParisGoodman.com. Vicki, Vicki, Paris, like the city in France, Goodman.com. And the audio recordings, just go to inspiredgrief.com and put in your email address. And I believe it asks for your first name as well. And that's it. And you'll get 7-day access to those 3 audio recordings, which are under 15 minutes each. And they are really well worth the time spent. Believe me, you'll be blown away.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Guys, we're going to wrap up the way we do every episode. You are never stuck. You are never lost, and you are never, ever alone. At any given moment, you can use your power to pivot, make a new choice, and start again. I will talk with everyone on the next episode. Please make sure you get Vicki's book, check out the audio episodes. And Vicki, thanks again for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Liz. It was my pleasure.